The flag still hung at half-mast when the lawyer called my name. To Mr. Robert Hale, he read, his voice steady and neutral. Your father leaves you this envelope. A single envelope. No deed to the estate. No share in the pension funds or investments my father built after 3 decades in uniform. Just a thin envelope, small enough to slip into a breast pocket and forget. Across the polished table, my brother Dean leaned back like he was starring in his own victory parade. Looks like Dad didn't think much of you, he smirked. Guess serving your country isn't worth as much as serving the family bank account. A chuckle rippled through the room. Forced, awkward, hungry for favor. These people had shown up to mourn a general, but they were celebrating a fortune. I didn't give them the satisfaction of looking hurt. A soldier learns early that emotions are luxuries, best kept in check. My father, General Jonathan Hale, had taught me that. Dean raised his glass. To Dad, a great man who knew how to reward loyalty. They toasted, I didn't. Dad believed loyalty was earned, not bought. I studied the envelope. The wax seal was stamped with his initials. J.H. His penmanship. Sharp, clean, disciplined. Spelled out my name. I slipped outside before anyone noticed I'd gone. The winter air tasted of pine and faint gunpowder. A reminder of the military funeral that had finished only hours ago. My father's medals still gleamed in my memory, reflecting the cold November sun as they lowered him into the ground. I cracked the seal. Inside, a plane ticket and a short note in his unmistakable hand. Robert, if you're reading this, then the mission is yours. Report to London. Someone will meet you. This is your final assignment. Carry it with honor. Dad, a final assignment. Not a request, not advice, an order. Footsteps approached behind me. Dean, hands in his pockets, wearing an arrogance he never earned. So what's the plan, brother, he asked. Gonna chase ghosts in Europe? Maybe find a pub where somebody cares you used to be a colonel? I slipped the note and ticket into the inside pocket of my coat. Enjoy the house, Dean. His grin widened. Don't worry, Robbie. I'll send you postcards. Maybe even invite you over if you finally do something useful. I met his eyes, not angry, not defeated, just resolute. Dad didn't measure usefulness in dollars. Something flickered in his expression. Just for a second. A crack in his confidence. Because he knew I was right. He had wealth. I had something else, service, duty, honor, things he could never inherit. I walked away from him, from the estate, from the vultures feasting on my father's legacy. The next morning I packed light. Old habits die hard. A duffel, documents, nothing unnecessary. A soldier travels prepared, not comfortable. The plane wasn't luxurious, but it was paid for with purpose. I slept hardly at all. I kept rereading Dad's letter, trying to hear the voice behind the ink. Dad had never been dramatic. If he wrote this, there was reason. When we descended into the fog of Heathrow Airport, rain tracked down the window like a slow salute. I tightened the collar of my coat, duffel strap over my shoulder, and walked toward the arrivals hall. Then I stopped. A man stood alone near the exit, posture straight, uniform immaculate, medals shining under the harsh terminal lights. He carried a placard with my name written in a perfect military hand. Colonel Robert Hale. When our eyes met, he walked forward, heels clicking like rifle bolts. He opened the door of a waiting car, a black vehicle bearing a royal crest. Then he saluted, sharp, precise, respectful. Colonel, he said, welcome to London. His voice dropped to a confidential tone, meant for soldiers, and soldiers only. Her Majesty has been expecting you. A chill moved through me, not fear recognition. This wasn't a courtesy trip. It was a mission, and my father had trusted me, not Dean, to carry it out. As I stepped into the car, the door shut quietly behind me, sealing the past outside. My father hadn't left me the mansion. He'd left me something far greater, a legacy still unfinished. And now, it was mine to complete. The drive from Heathrow wasn't long, but it felt like entering another world. London's gray sky hung low, rain tapping lightly against the car roof like steady drumbeats. Quiet, persistent, familiar. The man in uniform sat across from me in the back seat, posture flawless, eyes forward. Not once did he check his phone, fidget, or make small talk. A professional, someone trained. Finally, I broke the silence. You served. His eyes shifted toward me, not surprised, just acknowledging. 22 years, sir. Royal Marines. I nodded. Army, 26. For the first time, something softened in his expression. Mutual recognition. The universal language of those who understood sacrifice. We didn't speak again until the car slowed through security gates and entered a courtyard paved with polished stone. The building ahead wasn't Buckingham Palace. It was smaller, fortified, discreet. The kind of building governments pretended didn't exist. My escort exited first, then opened my door with a respectful nod. This way, Colonel. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper, brass polish, and history. Portraits lined the hallway, commanders, intelligence officers, analysts, people whose lives rarely made public memory, but whose decisions shaped it. A woman waited at the end of the corridor. Calm, sharp eyes, civilian clothes. But her stance told me her background didn't come from books. It came from briefing rooms and classified clearances. She extended a hand. Colonel Hale, I'm Eleanor Davenport, liaison for international defense cooperation. Her grip was firm, controlled. Not a bureaucrat, someone who had lived operational tempo. Your father spoke highly of you, she added. That stopped me. Dad was not a man who gave praise lightly, not even to his sons. I studied her carefully. My father didn't talk much about his work after retirement. She gave a small, knowing smile. Not to the public, not to his friends, and not even to his family. She motioned for me to walk with her. Your father was many things, a general, a strategist, and a bridge between nations during years when communication mattered more than firepower. We entered a room that looked part briefing center, part personal museum. On a long table rested files, folders, and a locked black case. The case bore two emblems side by side. U.S. Department of Defense, UK Ministry of Defense. I felt my pulse tighten. She continued. General Hale wasn't just attending ceremonies here. He wasn't here for diplomacy, retirement hobbies, or ceremonial handshakes. She touched the case gently. He was leading a joint covert veteran support and intelligence continuity program, one that operated quietly between both nations. My breath stilled, not from shock, but from the weight of understanding Dad never retired. Not truly. He just changed theaters. Eleanor studied my expression. Robert, your father chose you for one reason. I waited. Because you understand service without recognition, responsibility without applause, honor without audience. I swallowed once, hard. Why London? I finally asked. She opened a folder and slid it toward me. Inside was a list, names, dates, operational areas, veterans from both nations. Some marked as missing, others as unaccounted, a few with a cold final word. Deceased. These men and women served in programs that never entered public record, she said quietly. When they left the military, they left without benefits, without documentation, without acknowledgement. She met my eyes. Your father built a network to find them, to protect them, to ensure they were never abandoned. A slow breath escaped me, because suddenly everything made sense. The late-night calls, the unannounced trips, the quiet donations, the look in his eyes when he said, "A soldier is never off duty, not in the ways that matter." Eleanor placed a silver key in my hand. He asked that this be given to you only if you agreed to continue his work. I stared at it, simple, cold, heavy with responsibility. Did he know? I started. She nodded gently. That you'd say yes? Yes. He knew. My throat tightened. Not with pride, but with grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Service teaches you to hold the line, to compartmentalize loss, to keep moving. But standing there, in that room filled with the silent legacy of those who served unseen, grief became purpose. Eleanor spoke softly. There's one more thing. She handed me a small photograph. My father stood beside a group of soldiers, British and American, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since childhood on the back, written in his handwriting, "For when the mission becomes yours." I closed my eyes briefly, then nodded. "Tell me where to begin." Eleanor smiled, not triumphant, not relieved, respectful. "Then welcome back to service, Colonel." Rain hit the windshield in steady streaks as I sat in the back of the government-issued SUV, watching London blur past a thick folder rested beside me, its edges worn from years of handling. Inside it were names, soldiers from both nations, men and women who had served in covert humanitarian and intelligence missions during the late stages of the Gulf War, the Balkans, and early counterterrorism operations. Some were marked located, some deceased, and some marked with a red stamped word that made my stomach tighten. Unaccounted, Eleanor's voice echoed in my head from the briefing earlier. "Someone has been dismantling the network, quietly and deliberately. Not lost, not forgotten, targeted." The vehicle stopped outside a modest brick townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. No guards, no cameras, just an ordinary house with an ordinary number painted on the door. The man who opened it was anything but ordinary. He was tall, lean, gray at the temples. His posture, straight, alert, even in civilian clothes, made it clear he once stood in formation. His eyes flicked over me in a quick assessment. Threat level, posture, hands, expression, then recognition. "You're his son," he said quietly. "The general's boy." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Colonel Robert Hale." He stepped aside. "Name's Callum Ward, Royal Marines, retired. Your father saved my life more times than I deserved." His home was small, worn, and carefully kept, no medals on display, no photographs in frames. Only one item sat openly, a folded flag resting on a piano. He caught my glance. "My son," he said softly, "Afghanistan." I nodded once, the only answer there ever is among those who understand. We sat across from each other at a simple kitchen table. A kettle whistled quietly behind him. "Your father used to come here," Callum said. "Not publicly, not dressed like a general, just a man making sure old soldiers didn't disappear." I slid the folder toward him. "I need your help, Callum. Names are going missing, not just from records, from the world." Callum opened the file, scanning the pages with a narrowing gaze. His jaw shifted as he read. Then he stopped, finger pressing firmly on one name. "This one," he said. "Staff Sergeant Adam Cross, U.S. Army, last seen 3 years ago." I leaned forward. "You knew him, worked with him. Bosnia, 99. Hard man, good heart. If he's missing, it wasn't by accident." He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking, remembering, calculating. "Before your father died, he warned me. Said someone was digging into operations that were never meant to surface again." I felt a cold prickle move up my spine. "Why now?" Callum exhaled slowly. "Because peace doesn't erase power. Veterans from those missions hold knowledge. Locations, contacts, agreements, never written down. Someone wants those threads cut." He stood abruptly and walked to a drawer near the fridge. He returned with a small metal box, rusted at the hinges. When he opened it, I realized it wasn't rust. It was dried sand. I recognized the origin. So did he. "Saudi border operations," I said quietly. Callum nodded. Inside were dog tags, 5 sets, belonging to men I recognized from the missing list. My chest tightened. "Why do you have these?" His voice dropped. "Because they didn't die in combat. They disappeared after." The room seemed smaller suddenly, the weight of truth pressing against every wall. Callum leaned forward, voice low and razor steadied. "Your father wasn't just running support, he was running protection. And whoever is hunting these men now knows he's gone." My grip tightened on the folder. This wasn't inheritance. This was continuation. A mission left mid-sentence. "Do you know where to start looking?" I asked. Callum hesitated, then nodded once. "There's someone you need to meet. Someone your father trusted more than anyone still breathing." "Who?" He slid a handwritten address across the table. "Cross trained under him. They kept in contact. If Cross is alive, this man will know." I folded the paper and tucked it into my jacket. Callum walked me to the door. Before I stepped out into the rain, he stopped me. Robert, your father never feared war. But this? He feared what would happen if the wrong people took control of those who served unseen. I met his eyes. I won't let that happen. Callum nodded. Then you'd better be ready. The door closed behind me. The rain felt colder now. Not just weather, but warning. This wasn't just about missing veterans. It was about someone erasing them. And now? Now they knew I was looking. The train ride north was quiet, the kind of quiet that made you aware of every breath and every memory you never asked to revisit outside the window. Rolling fields blurred into fog. Bare winter trees standing like silent sentries across the countryside. The address Callum had given me led to a rural stop far from the noise of London. Too far to be coincidence, people who didn't want to be found chose places like this. When the train finally slowed to a halt, only 2 passengers stepped off, myself and an elderly woman carrying groceries. The platform was small, unguarded, and nearly swallowed by mist. A black Land Rover waited beside the exit. The driver, mid-60s, weathered face, eyes sharp as a loaded rifle, watched me approach. He didn't step forward, didn't offer a greeting. He simply asked, "Rank?" "Colonel," I answered. His eyes scanned mine, not looking for respect, but truth. "Branch?" "U.S. Army, infantry, later joint operations." He nodded once and motioned toward the passenger door. "Get in." No introductions, no small talk, just operational efficiency. The vehicle turned off the paved road and followed a narrow gravel path through dense pine forest. The smell of resin and cold earth filled the cabin. Finally, through the trees, a stone cottage appeared, isolated, fortified, purposeful. Inside, the space was sparse but organized. Maps, tactical radios, a safe bolted into concrete, and a large wood-burning stove glowing with steady heat. The man removed his coat and faced me. "Name's Briggs. Major, British Army. Retired, though retirements never meant much in our line of work." I'd heard the name before. My father had spoken it only once, years ago, with a tone I rarely heard. Trust. Not professional respect. Personal. I handed Briggs the folder. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he studied me the way a commander evaluates a soldier before sending him into a firefight. "Before we go any further," he said quietly, "I need to know one thing." I waited. "Are you here because your father told you to, or because you believe in what he died protecting?" It wasn't a test, it was a doorway. "I'm here because the mission didn't end with him," I answered, "and because no soldier who served deserves to disappear." Briggs finally opened the file. As he read, the stern expression he wore didn't change, but his grip tightened around the paper. After a long moment, he spoke. "Cross was last seen in Manchester. He reached out a year ago, concerned. Said someone had approached him asking questions about Bosnia and a supply route that was never officially recorded." I raised an eyebrow. "Intelligence?" Briggs shook his head. "Private sector, well-funded, well-connected. Men who operate in shadows not because they're protecting nations, but because they're profiting from them." My stomach tightened. "A black ops extraction company?" "Worse," Briggs muttered. "A deniable one." He crossed the room and retrieved a laptop from a locked drawer. When he entered a password, a document appeared. Encrypted, time-stamped, marked with the crest of the Ministry of Defense. Messages. From my father Briggs. "Cross contacted me again. Says he's being followed. If anything happens to me, continue protocol. Hale Jr. knows nothing yet, but he will. J.H." The words hit like shrapnel. My father hadn't expected to finish this mission. Briggs turned the screen toward me. "Your father started tracking a group buying classified intelligence from former operatives. Names, locations, mission logs. After he refused to cooperate, things escalated." My jaw clenched. "You think his death wasn't natural?" Briggs didn't hesitate. "I think your father was a threat to people who wanted silence." I stood, pacing once, grounding myself with slow, controlled breathing. The same way I did before combat, Do we know who these people are? Briggs opened another file. A photo. A man in a suit. Polished. Confident. Too confident. Dean. My brother. The room fell into silence so sharp it felt like pressure on bone. Briggs watched my reaction carefully. You said your brother inherited everything. Did he know about the program? I swallowed. He knew Dad traveled. He knew there were classified files. But he never cared. Not until money was involved. Briggs exhaled through his nose. Your father suspected either a mole or someone close being leveraged, but he never confirmed it. The pieces rearranged themselves in my mind. My brother's smugness, the timing, his sudden access to overseas investments, and his comment at the will hearing, looks like Dad didn't love you much. No, Dad loved me enough to protect me from what Dean had become part of. I looked Briggs in the eye. Where do we start? Briggs handed me a smaller folder, thin but heavy with consequence. We find Cross. If he's alive, he holds the thread that unravels this. I nodded. Briggs grabbed his coat and keys. You're not alone in this, Colonel. Your father didn't build a program. He paused at the door. He built a network. And now, it's waking back up. As we stepped outside into the cold dusk, the mission was no longer theoretical. It was personal, and the enemy wasn't foreign. He carried my last name. 2 days later, Briggs and I reached an abandoned industrial warehouse outside Manchester. The windows were covered, no security cameras, no visible power lines. But the silence around it felt wrong, like the stillness before artillery. Briggs scanned the perimeter with binoculars. We're not the first ones here. Boot prints in wet gravel confirmed it. 3 sets at least. 1 dragging step. Injured, restrained, or resisting Cross. We moved in quietly. Muscle memory returned instinctively. Controlled breathing, slow foot placement, mentally mapping exits. After decades of service, your body remembers even when your mind wishes it didn't. Inside, the warehouse smelled of damp metal and engine oil. Faint light filtered through cracks in the ceiling. We heard voices before we saw them. Not arguing, negotiating. Briggs held up 2 fingers, signaling 2 targets, then pointed ahead. Cross sat in a chair, hands zip-tied, bruises forming under his eye. But he was alive, alert, and standing in front of him, dressed in the same expensive suit I had seen in the photo, was my brother. Dean. His voice was calm, careful. Adam, we don't need every detail. Just the locations and the remaining names. Once we have that, you walk away. We both win. Cross spat blood at his feet. You don't stop until every one of us is gone. You want silence, you can monetize. That's not business, that's betrayal. Dean sighed. You soldiers really love that word loyalty. Brotherhood, honor. He leaned closer. But war doesn't last forever. Money does. Briggs exhaled slowly, fury controlled only by discipline. He whispered, we move on your call. I stepped out first. Not hidden, not armed high, just present. Dean froze mid-sentence, eyes widening. Robert, what the hell are you doing here? My voice stayed steady. Finishing what Dad started. He laughed, a short, brittle sound. Dad wasn't a hero, Robert. He was a relic. He held on to old ideals while the world moved forward. I took a step closer. Dad protected people who served. You're selling them. His jaw tightened, breaking the polished confidence he hid behind Cross, looked up at me, recognition flickering. Hale, I served under your father. You have his eyes. I gave a small nod, then turned back to Dean. This ends now. Dean shook his head. No, this is just beginning. Governments don't protect soldiers. They use them, discard them, and forget them. I'm correcting the imbalance. I'm making sure we profit from what was already taken. I studied him, not as a brother, but as a threat. You never understood service. He stepped closer until only inches separated us. No, I understood advantage. And you? You're still Dad's obedient soldier, acting out orders from a man who's been dead for months. Before I could speak, Briggs moved forward, his tone sharp. You're under investigation for interference with classified defense intelligence, human targeting, and clandestine asset trafficking. Dean's face drained of color. He turned to run. Briggs was faster. In 3 steps, he had him restrained on the concrete. Dean's voice cracked, not confident now, but desperate. "Robert, you don't have to let them arrest me. We can work this out. Hale blood sticks together, right?" I looked at him, the brother who mocked my service, who betrayed veterans who gave everything, who saw sacrifice as currency. "Family isn't blood," I said quietly. "It's loyalty." His expression hardened, anger replacing fear. "You're making a mistake." "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." Minutes later, authorities arrived, silent, efficient, and already briefed. Briggs had called them before we entered. He was prepared, more than I realized. Cross was freed and checked by medics. As he stood, he looked at me with tired gratitude. "Your father would have been proud." The words hit harder than they should have. When everything was secured and the scene finally cleared, Briggs placed a hand on my shoulder. "There's one more part of this mission." I raised an eyebrow. He nodded toward the horizon. "Now you lead." Weeks passed. The network my father built wasn't just preserved, it was strengthened. Missing veterans were located, support channels reopened, and international cooperation restored quietly but firmly. No press releases, no medals, just responsibility carried forward. I visited my father's grave one cold morning. The cemetery was quiet, grass stiff with frost, a flag stirring gently in the wind. I placed a folded list beside his headstone. Updated, corrected, restored. "Mission complete," I said softly. After a long silence, I added, "Thank you for trusting me." The wind shifted, and for the first time since his funeral, the weight inside me eased. Not gone, but steadier. Service doesn't end with retirement, and legacy isn't inherited, it's chosen. I stood, adjusted my coat, and walked away. Not as a son burdened by what was left behind, but as a soldier ready for what still needed to be done.